certain types of products and services, and of course this was really at the discretion of the departments, could be classified as a type A contract. And in that situation, the contract could be given to anyone that, among other things, the district or the department leader or department members felt good about. The World Drive North Extension Project essentially is designed to address some of these traffic problems that you were talking about. But part of it, part of this, the third phase of it in any case, requires there to be a crossing of 3 holes on a Disney-owned golf course. RCID agreed to pay $7.7 million for the cost of moving those 3 holes on the golf course. And in fairness, we were told by the employees that this was a great economic deal. But the one thing we didn't find anywhere was any sort of independent economic evaluation that had been performed by anyone to determine whether the $7.7 million would be the best way to proceed, or if it would have been better to go through a condemnation proceeding. There were over $21 million of budgeted road improvements that were never made between 2020, I believe, and 2023.
Cones.
And we asked about that, and we were told that there were environmental conditions and over-aggressiveness by the head of the department that would have been responsible for making the improvements. But what we ultimately discovered is that that money actually became an $18 million surplus for the general fund, which is obviously a more easily accessed fund for other purposes that might be carried out under the auspices of the board, the RCID board.
So $21 million of approved infrastructure improvement projects, right? Roads, cones that are there now. And $18 million of that found its way eventually over into a general fund surplus where, let's just say, the level of scrutiny that Bill Jennings just previously laid out, right? Anything under $200,000, whatever. There basically is no level of scrutiny. And of course, all of this, as we continue to learn, was going to benefit Disney.
It makes you wonder if there was any process at all for them to move these massive amounts from one ledger to another, or did they just was it as simple as saying, you know what, switch the spreadsheet? It's really amazing.
Speaking of ledgers, as we'll find out later, everything was on the same general ledger. Bay Lake, Lake Buena Vista, RCID, everything was on the same general ledger. There was no segregation of record keeping at all. Why? Because they were all phony cities anyway. It's amazing.
The money that was spent for road improvements were spent to improve roads that would be used by Disney customers. The roads that were not the roads that would be used by Disney customers were left untended. And in fact, independent evaluations of their current condition revealed a decline in performance, or a decline in condition, rather, following 2017. The district adopted an accounting methodology that essentially, without boring you with the details, requires that if you adopt this methodology, you are agreeing to maintain the assets that you are accounting for in this way in their best condition. And so if you fail to do that, you would likely be required to change the accounting method. And if that happened, that would have an impact on potentially on bond ratings and interest rates paid by the district.
Oops. That's where the MSRB comes in. Why, folks? Because a lot of the projects that Mr. Jennings is referring to, that he's talking about with the former Reedy Creek, would have been, at least in part, co-financed by, Mike?
Well, first of all, there shouldn't have been any co-financing at all. I mean, can we go there or not?
I was going to say municipal bonds, like issued bonds by the district.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm having a hard time calling these bonds that were issued having been municipal bonds because, frankly, Valiant, from what I read and the use of the funds and the proceeds, these were corporate bonds. I mean, I'm having a hard time seeing that these were actually bona fide municipal bonds that were
Mike,
used
these were beautiful
purposes.
These were beautiful, one-of-a-kind, tax-free corporate bonds, Mike.
Right.
With more favorable interest rates,
And I
right?
think probably what happened when you get into the things like the power plant and other stuff, things get real disturbing real quick. I mean, really disturbing, like losing my lunch disturbing.
Mm-hmm. And just for the audience, I mean, what Jennings is talking about here is that if they did the things they were supposed to do, or they didn't do the things that they were supposed to do, and they had to make changes to the accounting methods and the promises that were made, that means the municipal bonds that they floated through the MSRB that we talked about before, and the prospectuses for those bonds that basically disclose to investors, the purchasers of these bonds, disclose to investors what they're for, what they're supposed to be, right, to benefit this special taxing district, all the taxpayers in the special taxing district, which we'll get to in a minute. If that was stated incorrectly, knowingly or otherwise, it could cause them some serious problems. There could be a lot of serious MSRB rule violations here, meaning these bonds could be voided.
They're ringing bells at least half a dozen regulatory agencies. And even though I understand the attitude in the comments that, well, listen, no, nothing's going to happen. There's no accountability. That, you know, they're Democrat friendly. I get that. I completely get that. We all get that. Mm-hmm. But when you've got this, I mean, this makes Hunter Biden look like a piker. Okay?
Oh yeah.
Wait till the Mickey Mouse photos come out.
We always suspected there was a furry aspect we're not hearing about.
Oh, man. All right, let's go back to it.
The way things work in accounting is when you're constructing an asset, in other words, before it's completed, you account for it as something called construction in progress, meaning that you don't depreciate it, and it's not viewed as an asset that is expected to produce anything until you complete it. We found a number of assets, so this would have been tens of millions of dollars, in construction in progress that had not moved out of construction in process since 2021. A lot of the records we were given were 2021 forward. Equipment is sitting in a warehouse. We weren't a lot of the other equipment related to the utilities, and I'll explain why in a minute, that we weren't able to do much with that. But a lot of the utility equipment also is in construction process or progress and has not moved to completed status. We thought the district was paying for policing, but of course that would be forbidden by the district's, the RCID's charter. And we did learn that, in fact, that charter had not been violated, that the policing was being paid for by Bay Lake and Lake Buena Vista.
Remember, those are the two cul-de-sacs, each with about maybe a dozen double-wide trailers around them. That's Lake Buena Vista and Bay Lake, the two cities, right?
The problem is that the reason we thought it was a problem to begin with is all of that information, all that accounting information for the cities and for the district is actually in the same general ledger. So the same accounting records at the district. So the district does all the accounting for the cities. Now, for the policing payments, those were all made from bank accounts that were owned by Bay Lake and Lake Buena Vista. And so everything was fine from the who paid for the policing part. But what we then discovered was that actually the district provides all of the services for the cities, for Bay Lake and Lake Buena Vista, under an interlocal agreement that was entered into in 2022. It's a 40-year agreement and literally pays for everything that the cities require in terms of services except policing.
In 2022, a 40-year agreement that came when? probably right about the time just after when the legislation was passed in Florida to completely rip apart the RCID.
By the district. Now, the problem with that is not everybody in the district lives in Bay Lake or Lake Buena Vista. In fact, the people who live in Bay Lake, residents of Bay Lake,
the trailers
and Lake Buena Vista, are either current or former Disney employees who were employed by Disney for more than 10 years in their
Shocky
family.
McShockerton.
And so the people who aren't those people are paying taxes but not receiving the benefits, because those are actually going to the residents of the cities.
Dirty energy. Dirty coal.
Yep.
Let's get back to
This
it.
plant, and I was told by one of the district employees that the reason for the plant was that it would be there in case of emergency. Well, again, I didn't get to speak to anybody, and I certainly...
He didn't get to speak to anybody because they were Disney employees, once again, that were told to refuse entry to these auditors to property that Disney did not own, that was owned by the district, and to not talk to them and not give them any information. That came from Disney.
was not allowed to enter the plant. But one thing I can tell you is unless it's generating electricity using gas turbines, the time to bring online any steam generated electric plant is significant. And so the extent to which it would be available in an emergency, in my opinion, is highly questionable.
And despite the fact that the district owns those assets, Disney did not give you access to them. Is that correct?
That is correct.